This brawl today shall send between the red rose and the white 1,000 souls to death and deadly night. Henry VI, Part 1, 1591. Germanus Personae. Henry VI, King of England, Duke of Gloucester, Henry's uncle and protector of England, Duke of Bedford, Henry's uncle and regent of France, Bishop of Winchester, later Cardinal, Henry's great-uncle, Duke of Somerset, the Duke of Exeter's nephew, Richard Plantagenet, later 3rd Duke of York, Earls of Warwick, Salisbury, and Suffolk, Lord Talbot, commander of English forces in France, Charles Dauphin of France, Margaret, French noble betrothed to Henry, Duke of Burgundy, Henry's uncle, Joan La Pucelle, Joan of Arc. At the funeral of Henry V, a fight breaks out between the young King Henry VI's uncles, Gloucester and Winchester. Messengers arrive from France. Town after town has fallen to the French, and England's hero Talbot has been captured. Outside besieged Orleans, the Dauphin Charles meets the maid Joan La Pucelle, whose visions promise victory for France. Talbot is freed in a prisoner exchange. The French triumph over the English. Joan beats Talbot in a duel but spares his life. Talbot retakes Orleans. In the garden of the Temple in London's Lawyers' Quarter, a quarrel between Richard Plantagenet and Somerset ends in them plucking red and white roses to signify their opposing loyalties. Richard's uncle Mortimer tells him how the king's grandfather, Henry IV, deposed the rightful Richard II and says that Richard has a claim to the throne. In Parliament, a fight breaks out between the men of Gloucester and Winchester. As King Henry tries to calm them, he agrees to make Richard Duke of York. In France, Joan takes Rouen from the English, but Talbot retakes it. Joan persuades Henry's uncle Burgundy to switch sides. Talbot travels to Paris, where Henry is to be crowned. There, Henry learns of Burgundy's treachery. He urges York and Somerset to put aside their quarrel, but unwillingly insults York by donning a red rose. To repair the damage, Henry makes York regent of France and orders Somerset to back him. Meanwhile, outside Bordeaux, Talbot and his son are fatally wounded in a battle. Talbot dies with his son's body in his arms. Gloucester tells the king that the French Earl of Armagnac wishes to make peace. Henry agrees and is persuaded to marry Armagnac's daughter to seal the deal. The people of Paris revolt, and Charles and Joan march on in Paris. Joan conjures spirits to help her cause, but the English triumph and Joan is captured. Suffolk is bewitched by the beauty of Margaret of Anjou and promises to make her Henry's wife. York condemns Joan to burn as a witch and rails against the effeminate peace Henry is making with France. Suffolk excites Henry with his account of Margaret's beauty, and he agrees to marry her. In context, themes: battle, kingship, family ties, civil war. Setting: London, Paris, Orleans, Auvergne, and Angers. Sources: 1516. Some scenes were inspired by Robert Fabian's New Chronicle of England and France. 1545. Edward Hall's union of the two noble illustrious families of Lancaster and York. 1577. Raphael Holinshed's Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland. Legacy. 1592. The play is a huge success when it is first staged at the Rose Theatre. 1738. The first recorded performance following Shakespeare's death takes place at Covent Garden in London. Several dance sequences are added. 1873. Henry VI, Part 1 is performed in Vienna. 1906. British director Frank Benson stages all three Henry VI's without changing any of them, the first time this has been done since the 1590s. 1990. Director Michael Bogdanov releases a film of all Henry VI's plays recorded on consecutive nights at the Grand Theatre, Swansea. Evidence suggests that Henry VI Part 1 was written after the second two parts of the Henry VI trilogy and is staged to great acclaim for the first time in 1592. So it is essentially a prequel, setting the events of the later two plays in context. It is grand in scale, encompassing England and France with sweeping battle scenes and thrilling hand-to-hand duels, while the other two parts are more narrowly focused. Break thou in pieces and consumed ashes, Thou foul accursed murder minister of hell. Sorry. Thou foul accursed minister of hell. Richard, Duke of York, Act 5, Scene 6. The death of the heroic Henry V leaves English rule in France in chaos as the new king, Henry VI, still little more than a child, finds himself unable to quell the quarrels at home. At first, the strife is between his uncles Gloucester and Winchester over who should be his protector. The conflict soon erupts between the supporters of the Lancastrian faction led by Somerset and the Yorkists led by Richard Plantagenet, who secretly believes the throne is rightfully his. Each faction chooses a rose for its emblem, white for York, red for Lancaster. The play presents this choice in a scene in the Inner Temple Garden in London, in which Richard Plantagenet asks the assembled lawyers to pluck a rose. The lawyer picks a white rose, suggesting that he thinks Richard's case is strong in law. Challenged to make his case, Somerset replies that argument is his sword. The scene is set for the Wars of the Roses. Against this civil conflict, the Maid of Orleans, Joan Le Pucelle, known today as Joan of Arc, emerges to lead the French with her divine visions. She is pitted against worthy English hero in Talbot, who at the end is failed by his quarreling countrymen. In this picture, after defeating him in hand-to-hand combat, Joan of Arc, played by Katie Stevens, spares the life of Lord Talbot, played by Keith Barlow, in the 2006 production at the Courtyard Theatre in London. Dubious authorship. Because of the variable quality of the verse, critics have long questioned the play's authorship. The poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge was certain Shakespeare could not have written it, or at least not all of it. Many critics now think it was a collaborative work with writers such as Thomas Nash, who perhaps wrote Act 1. Computer analysis of language patterns suggests that while Shakespeare probably wrote Henry VI Part 2 and most of Part 3, he was author of only some of Part 1, the Temple Garden scene and the scene in Act 4 between Talbot and his son. Early commentators such as the English playwright Ben Jonson criticized Henry VI Part 1 for its crowd-pleasing battle scenes. Jonson insisted that in a proper literary play, such battles would have been created in the imagination with skillful use of words, not crude stage techniques. However, over the last half-century, critics have rediscovered in the play some of the excitement and political sharpness that would have engaged audiences in 1592. How say you, madam? Are you not persuaded that Talbot is but shadow of himself? Talbot, Act 2, Scene 3. Family crisis. At the heart of the play lies the importance of family as the glue that binds society together. After all, claims to be the rightful king, claims that foment the terrible strife to come between the Yorkists and Lancastrians, hinge on proper family relationships, but it goes further than that. Familial bonds, such as the deep one between Talbot and his son, are fundamental, and when these are lost, society is set adrift. Legitimacy is crucial. Gloucester emphasizes that Winchester is the bastard of my grandfather, while Talbot invades against the bastard Orleans, who killed his trooper's son. The play omits Talbot's real-life illegitimate son Henry, who also died in the same battle. Political crisis emerges from a crisis in the family. Some critics argue that this is why the women in Henry VI are so negatively portrayed. Joan of Arc, Margaret, and the Countess of Auvergne are all presented as dangerous women who cause chaos by their effect on men and on proper relationships. In the first 4 acts, Joan is mostly portrayed as a holy visionary, but in Act 5, she morphs into the witch conjuring up demons. She engages in York to beg for her life with hysterical ferocity and wild curses, understandable perhaps when she's about to be burned alive. Some directors have noticed that the very moment one femme fatale, Joan, leaves the center of the action, another, Margaret of Anjou, makes her entrance. When the Henry VI plays are performed together, the same actress sometimes plays both Joan and Margaret to underscore the part that they are part of the same danger. Although Margaret, Henry's future queen, is very different. While Joan dresses as a man to win her battles, Margaret remains womanly on the outside, and her power comes from her sexual allure. Suffolk, the earl who plays enticed Henry with Margaret's charms, closes the play with the promise that Margaret shall now be queen and rule the king, but I will rule both her, the king, and the realm. But Suffolk is deluded. He likens himself to Paris, who elopes with the beautiful Helen of Troy. But it is a telling choice. Like Helen, Margaret will only bring strife. Suffolk is banished and gruesomely beheaded.